I'm sure that I'm not the only man in America with a massive crush on Judge Amy Coney Barrett. She's just about perfect, and she would be confirmed without a doubt. But I thought I'd look at the 4 issues about which she was grilled by Democrats over the last week. These are the issues that they count on to instill fear and loathing in their activist base as regards the court. Other things came up, but these were the big 4. Racial discrimination, guns, health care, and of course, abortion. But in my estimation, they fail to realize that history and recent events have tipped the country on its side. Democrats are changing. In real ways, the assumptions that undergird their positions on these 4 issues are falling apart. Democrat voters, in my view, are not quite where these senators think they are. Let's get into it. Okay, let's start with racial discrimination. Every time the Democrats run out of gas, they try to refight the civil rights struggle. They rail about the systemic racism sending blacks to prison and suppressing their votes, when every one of the cities sending loads of blacks to jail has been run by Democrats for decades. The mayors are Democrat. The chiefs of police are Democrat. The judges are all Democrats. The schools are controlled by Democrats. And the polls are manned by Democrats. When Cory Booker insists that blacks are treated unfairly, his implication is that it's Republicans doing this. The problem is that there aren't any Republicans in the picture. They made a mistake this year. First, they closed down the businesses because of a virus. This left their hardest working, most disciplined voters home with the TV and the computer. Then, they sided with the Marxist hustlers of Black Lives Matter to trash the cities that these furloughed workers keep afloat with their own labor and taxes, all the while claiming that everyday people are racists who are too ignorant to even know that they're racists. Unconscious bias, you see. These politicians and the academics who feed them their material put a lot of faith in the gullibility of their voters. But you can connect an awful lot of dots with 6 months of forced layoff and a good internet connection. How long do these politicians think they can run this scam? Exalting slackers like George Floyd and Jacob Blake to hero status while blaming the trouble they got into on invisible racists instead of lifetimes of bad decisions rooted in homes with no fathers. Any smart, hard-working Democrat watching the Barrett hearing saw her family sitting politely, and they knew that what petty criminals like George Floyd and Jacob Blake really needed was the sort of discipline that they saw in Judge Barrett's children. This family demonstrates starkly what Democratic politicians don't want you to know, that the racial strife in this country is a culture issue. Racism doesn't cause these incidents or the riots they produce. A degraded culture does. A divided culture does. And it's all made worse by government pandering. For several days, a well-integrated miniature culture sat calmly and attentively at the right hand of Judge Barrett. Does anybody think that her black kids live by a different set of expectations and standards than her white kids? Smart people of goodwill will eventually connect these dots, regardless of their habitual voting patterns. The Second Amendment. When asked if her family owns a gun, Mrs. Coney Barrett simply said, yes. No apologies, no explanations. Yes. In the center of the country, guns are tools. When our nation was plunged into the shutdowns, we all saw the stripped supermarket shelves. We've all been to a local discount house recently and seen that 7 months in, shelves are still empty of many items. We now know that, even in America, if the streets are filled with revolutionaries and the supply chain is stretched to breaking, owning a gun is not just something for enthusiasts. In Los Angeles, where I live, gun sales skyrocketed as soon as the liberal suburbanites here had to face a reality that they might not be able to buy their way out of. They watched as left-wing activists ginned up a summer of violence, and they realized that maybe those people out in flyover country have a point about self-protection. Last week in Wisconsin, gangs of rioters took to breaking windows in suburban homes. You know, because they want police departments disbanded. How many people psychologically divorced the Democratic Party that night? How many have done the same in every chaotic blue city during the last 7 months? They may not all be headed for Texas or Florida or South Dakota, though a huge number are, but they sure as hell understand that you don't have to be a gun nut enthralled to the NRA in order to not just want a gun, but to need a gun. Obamacare. We all watched the Democratic primaries. We all heard virtually every candidate talk about how woefully unprotected Americans were from a health crisis. I thought the sainted Barack Obama solved this problem. At one point, every primary candidate except Joe Biden had distanced themselves from the ACA. Why would they do that? Because they knew that for everybody but the poor, who already qualified for Medicaid, Obamacare increased premiums while also raising deductions. All but the most compliant now understand what many of us knew in 2009. Obamacare was designed to bring pain to the middle class so they would eventually vote for single payer. The near-unanimous calls to replace Obamacare with Medicare for All during the primaries contrasted starkly with the sudden devotion to Obamacare we saw in the hearings. I guess they needed an extra attack vector against a woman who very obviously does care about the poor. Abortion. I spent the last 35 years with my right foot in the blue-collar world and my left foot in the world of folk music. The right side was dominated by a simple idea: work hard, be responsible, and you'll get ahead. The left side was dominated by vote Democrat and hope for subsidies. The hundreds of women I knew in the arts were foregoing motherhood in order to advance a career that depended on living cheap and staying flexible. Have guitar, will travel, as they say. Abortion was seen by them as a protection on their freedom to chase a dream. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, my social media feed was filled with testimonials to this woman and hand-wringing about the tragedy now faced by Trump choosing her successor. Everybody knew they were talking about abortion. But there was a certain weariness and rote quality to these testimonials. These women are now in their 50s and 60s. The big career never happened, and now they face the dark side of the deal they made. No children, no adorable grandchildren. Over the years, many of these women undoubtedly cringed as so-called reproductive rights went from canceling an embryo at 12 weeks to canceling a mostly formed fetus at 6 months, and then to killing a fully formed baby right up until the end of pregnancy. They had to accommodate these changes during the years where regret over their own earlier abortions had begun to put cracks in their feminist facade. By now, they cling ever more grimly to the notion that abortion is the freedom card, the success card. The fact that their own lives have not been quite so successful or free hasn't fully cured their enthusiasm for abortion. After all, misery loves company. But for those who watched the hearings hoping to be re-inspired about the feminist superpower of abortion, they saw instead a dauntingly intelligent woman who has not only engaged to the fullest in motherhood, but also risen to the absolute pinnacle of her chosen field. How's that for watering the seeds of doubt? Listen, the arrival of Judge Amy Coney Barrett is much more than a political win for the Republican Party. This is a very real woman from whom we can all learn. Here is a woman who knows what her values are and why she holds them. While operating from that foundation, she has, with humility and hard work, risen to consideration for the highest court in the land. She will be confirmed. And when her days are through, she will not only have defended the law of the country she loves, but she will have personally left behind a few dozen human beings who have grown up in an attitude of grace and generosity, not separable from the traditional American values that the hard left wants to make obsolete. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was a woman of her time. That time, however, was the era of overreaction. Women who felt marginalized by a certain type of man with a certain type of drive sought to emulate the very impulses that they felt oppressed by. Success at any cost, winning before all other considerations. Feminism lapsed into a half-century of overreach, where women tried to become something that they really are not, and Justice Ginsburg was perceived as their voice in the Supreme Court. Judge Amy Coney Barrett has arrived to fill Ginsburg's shoes in what will be the era of renewal. Here we saw a Midwestern woman, a devout Catholic, standing effortlessly against the verbal attacks of the best warriors that Senate Democrats could muster, and she did it with as much kindness and good humor as any mom ever brought to a dispute between siblings. Many times, over 2 grueling days of interrogation, she laughed genuinely at jokes made by politicians who seconds earlier had been saying why they thought she was a threat to America. That's a special kind of relaxed confidence. This is the kind of woman who makes a guy want to be a better man. That's the real superpower of women, the power that's been forsaken in the feminist quest to emulate male aggression. Just watch her exchanges with Amy Klobuchar for a demonstration of this contrast. Talk about mansplaining. Let's face it, every woman who ever raised a family with multiple children already knows how to be an impartial judge. That's kind of what a mother does. There were 4 Democratic female senators trying to fluster this unshakable supermom. Between the 4 of them, they have raised only 2 children. Only 2 of these women raised any kids at all, and each of those raised just 1. Hell, Mrs. Barrett has more black children than any of her 4 female interrogators have of any child. Amy Coney Barrett is all she's cracked up to be, and she's a whole lot more. At a time when division threatens to tear us asunder, here is a high-level academic with the heart of a country school teacher, a real feminist who's also really feminine, a woman of intellect and faith, a person too busy doing good and important things to get down in the dirt over politics. I think that people from both sides of the divide will come to like and respect her, as even her opponents did over this week of hearings. To emulate her is to draw a map back to what has made this a great country. She wouldn't want us to, but let's all just go ahead and put her on a pedestal. She deserves one. Amy Coney Barrett. Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Mrs. America. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to our channel and then click the little bell to get notifications.